Well, I said I wasn't going to do it, and I just can't resist. I'm going to do a release overview for Betaflight 3.0. I said I wasn't going to do a release overview because there are so many big changes in Betaflight 3.0 that I just don't feel like I can sort of sum them all up in one video, and I still feel that way. There are going to be other videos, individual videos that do deep dives into all of the intricacies of some of these topics, and many of them have already come out. I've got 2 videos now, I think, on the notch filter. I've got videos on Super Expo rates. I've got other, so they're all out there. But I'm going to do an overview for you because I think you want it, and hey, I can't say no to you guys. Betaflight 3.0 is a really big deal. In fact, I think it's fair to say that Betaflight 3.0 is as big a deal as perhaps CleanFlight was when CleanFlight broke off from Baseflight. Betaflight 3.0 is the first release where I think that Betaflight has really shaken off any semblance of the illusion that the primary purpose of Betaflight is to test new features and feed them back into CleanFlight, which is not to say that Betaflight, CleanFlight, iNav, the GPS-assisted flight fork, it's not to say that those things won't cross-pollinate and feed features back and forth. It has been happening, it's never stopped happening, and it's going to keep happening. But Betaflight 3.0 really has too many fundamental additions, new features, and so on to call it anything other than a full-fledged, freestanding flight controller software. So, welcome to the club, Betaflight. You're no longer just a test bed. You've graduated. The baby bird has flown the nest. Flown, get it? Haha. So let's go through the release notes first, and then we'll go through the configurator, and we'll talk about all the new stuff that's there. And as appropriate, I will add cards in the upper right, linking you to other videos. And of course, all of this stuff is in a playlist. There's a Betaflight playlist, and the latest 5 or 6 or 10 videos are all relating to Betaflight 3.0. So there's many different ways for you to consume this information. If we go through the release notes, we can see that Betaflight 3.0 is adding STM32 F4 support. F4 is the next processor up from the F3. We had the F1, which was on the NAS boards. We have the F3, which is on pretty much everything these days. And the F4 is the next one. And in case you're curious, the next one that people are talking about after that is the F7. And basically, those processors just get faster and faster. So just like our desktop processors have gotten faster and faster over the years, more memory, faster processors, the same thing is happening to our flight controllers. And what we're seeing is that the code that the flight controllers are being asked to run is becoming more and more demanding. So for example, before Betaflight 3.0, you could just about run the same PID loop frequency and gyro frequency on an F1 board as you did on an F3 board. But Betaflight 3.0 is the first time when many people are finding that they cannot anymore run, say, 4K, 2K on a NAS 32 F1. And many people are finding that they can't run 8K, 8K gyro and PID loop updates anymore on even an F3 board, which is, I've had people say to me, what about the X-Racer F303 V3.0? Isn't that supposed to support 125 loop time, which is an 8 kilohertz gyro and PID rate? And I say, well, yeah, it did when it was released. The gyro supports 8 kilohertz. It's just that suddenly the gyro is not the bottleneck anymore. Suddenly, for the first time in CleanFlight and Betaflight's history, the processor is not fast enough to keep up. It's never been the case before. It's always been the case that the gyro was the limiting factor. And now suddenly the code is complicated enough that the processor is the limiting factor. So one thing that you want to know as you go to Betaflight 3.0, you always want to be looking at your CPU utilization. And here you can see your CPU utilization at the bottom of the Betaflight configurator, which if you are running Betaflight 3.0, you should be using the Betaflight configurator. Get it from the Chrome App Store. Don't use the CleanFlight configurator anymore. You're in a new domain now, a new paradigm. Okay, so you're going to want to be looking at your CPU load as you load Betaflight 3.0, and if you find that it's too high, if you find that you can't arm consistently, if you find that you have problems with your motors twitching and glitching, you may need to go ahead and lower that loop time just a little bit. Where's it? There we go. See, I'm running 8K, 2K on this board. This isn't even a real flight board. This is just something I've plugged in on the desk. But this one's at 8K, 2K. And it just, since we're here, let's put it at 8K, 8K and watch what happens. Here we go. Let's see, that was under, oh, there you go. Yeah, CPU load 100%. This copter will not fly. Okay, so yeah, you can't do that anymore. You used to could. Now you can't. Not on an F3, but you can on an F4. So we finally hit the ceiling on our processor, and the day will come when we will move to F4, and F3s will go away. So Betaflight 3.0 is the first one to have widespread F4 board support. So you can run Betaflight on your Revo. Can you run it on a Revo? I would assume so. There's another one called the Blue Jay I've heard of that I believe can run Betaflight. And you can do a little side-by-side comparisons even between Betaflight and Raceflight. Wouldn't that be fascinating? I'm not going to go there. It also says here in the release notes that we have working BL Heli Passthrough, and I assume that means that BL Heli Passthrough didn't or doesn't work on F4 boards, but Betaflight has made it work. Yay, that's good. I know I talked to some of the Raceflight guys and I said, does it support BL Heli Passthrough? And they said, well, no, Raceflight doesn't do BL Heli Passthrough. Raceflight has BL Heli configuration baked into the configurator. It's not passing through, it's just communicating. And they said, no, but Passthrough doesn't work, and I don't know why it doesn't work, but for whatever reason, it does work on Betaflight. Good, excellent. There's some stuff here that's going on under the hood that I don't really know much about, like this full I/O rework, major target separations, easy implementation for new targets. That's not going to affect those of us who are pilots and not devs. Added OSD integration. So I had a video very recently about the Omnibus all-in-one with built-in OSD, and you can take a look at that. The Betaflight configurator now has the ability to configure a built-in onboard OSD that's built into the flight controller. New Betaflight PID controller. Now, stop there. There's more stuff here, but what you need to know mostly as a pilot is that there's a new PID controller. Remember LuxFloat and Rewrite and MultiWii and Harakiri? Well, there's a new one. It's the Betaflight PID controller. And if you're running Betaflight, this is the one you want to be running. It's got all the super special secret sauce. For the longest time, Boris was making Rewrite better, and then he made LuxFloat better, and then he played with MultiWii 2.3, and he made it better and played with those features, and he took all the best stuff that he from those, and he baked it into this Betaflight PID controller, and then he added some new stuff. Boris has been reading papers on process control and PID control and come up with some other stuff. The 2 degrees of freedom PID controller with the set point weight functions, and I have a video on that. That's all in the Betaflight PID controller, and that is where Boris is presumably going to be focusing his efforts going forward. And let's go to the PID tuning tab. If you are running on a board that cannot keep up with the new Betaflight PID controller, if your processor utilization is too high, or if you just don't like new things, go ahead and change the PID controller to Legacy, and it's basically Rewrite. You've gone back to Rewrite, and everything works like it used to in Rewrite, okay? So you're going to get much lower CPU utilization, but you're not going to get all these new fancy features. This is a fallback option. If you're running Betaflight, I would recommend that you be running the Betaflight PID controller, because the legacy one it's just going to be static now. It's not going to continue to improve. And you're running Betaflight because you want all the new fancy, wonderful, amazing things that Betaflight brings to the table that make your copter fly so freaking good. So this is where you want to be. Betaflight PID controller. RC interpolation has been added back. RC interpolation is a thing that smooths the RC input, the RC command input. RC command is what the signal coming from the receiver into the PID loop that tells the copter what it should be doing. And it's sampled at a certain rate, and because it is not sampled continuously, it has stair steps in it. So every time it's sampled, the new value comes in, and you get these stair steps. And those stair steps cause a thing called D-term kick. And I have a video about that. RC interpolation it used to be called RC smoothing. It smooths out RC command to get rid of the D-term kick. But after a while, Boris said, actually, D-term kick is not such a bad thing. And the RC smoothing, anytime you do filtering or smoothing, you get delay. And the delay is making things worse. So he took it out. But it turns out that with the new 2 degrees of freedom PID controller, especially with the D-term set point weight, when you turn the D-term set point weight up higher, the D-term gets so crazy that you need the smoothing again. So RC interpolation has been added back in, and there's various options for how to configure it. And if you don't want to tweak those options, just use auto, which is the default, and it will automatically configure itself, and you don't need to worry about it. So here we're in the receiver tab. It used to be in the PID tuning tab, but it moved, and you got RC interpolation auto, and you should probably just leave it at auto. If you want to use manual, you can choose the RC interpolating interval, and the RC interpolating interval is a function of how fast your RC command is being sampled, and that's related to your receiver and other factors as well. On FreeSky, the sampling rate changes depending on whether you have 8 or 16 channels active. There's various things, and that's why probably you should just leave it at auto and let it figure it out. There's very little reason that I can imagine why you would want to set it to manual, but if you really feel like you want to, you can. This is one of my favorite commands, and it's so simple and not sexy in any way. If we go to the command line, we can type diff, which stands for difference, and we can look for the differences between our current configuration and the default. And you can see here that there are almost no differences because this is just a default board I pulled out of a box to do this test on. So if, for example, I do, there we go, and then I type diff again, notice that here under diff we can see the change that I made right here. So what you do is, after you're done configuring your copter, you do a diff, and you end up with something like this. This is everything you changed about your configuration. So if you need to rebuild your configuration, bingo, here it is. But you don't have to keep the entire command line dump in one place anymore. And you don't have to paste it all back in. And it's easy for you to only put back the things you changed and not put back any of the other defaults that have changed. And that's the big one. If there's some default value that's changed and you paste back your old config, you would overwrite that default value with whatever your old config was. But with the diff, you only overwrite the things in the config that you actively changed the last time. And that's really nice. So that's not a sexy feature, but it's actually one of my favorite ones because I deal with a lot of different copters and configurations, right? So not having to keep a whole big command line dump for each one is a big deal. So this one says that Super Expo is removed. Super Expo is no longer a feature. There's no more feature Super Expo that you can turn on and off, but Super Expo is there. The way it works is in the PID tuning tab. In the PID tuning tab, there's a column, Super Rate, and the Super Rate controls how much Super Expo you're using. So if the Super Rate is 0, for you guys who don't want to use Super Expo, set your Super Rate to 0, and then just use RC Rate and RC Expo, right? RC Rate changes your overall rate, and RC Expo softens the curve. If instead you prefer to use Super Expo, you can set RC Expo to 0. It comes at 0.1 by default, but you can just set it to 0. And you can use RC Rate and Super Rate to change your values, and that's going to set up Super Expo rates. So there's no more feature Super Expo that you can turn on and off. You simply set Super Rates. You can set any combination. I mean, you could have RC Rates plus Super Rates plus Expo if you really wanted to. But the suggested approach is to either use RC Rate plus Super Rates or use RC Rate plus RC Expo and set the other one to 0 that you're not using. The linear rate range has changed. It used to be that you could not get to 2,000 degrees per second using only RC rate. And 2,000 degrees per second is the maximum rotation rate that our gyros support. That's a hardware limitation, not a software limitation. You didn't used to be able to achieve 2,000 degrees per second using only RC rate, which means that you had to use Super Expo in order to get those faster rates. And some people didn't like that. Some people don't like Super Expo. What if you want 2,000 degrees per second with a strictly linear curve? I don't know why you would want that, but what if you did? Well, now you can do it. The way it works is up to rate 2.002, you get relatively slow increase in rates. And notice that at RC rate of 2, we have 400 degrees per second. And then above 2, it skyrockets. It gets way steeper until at 255, you are at 2,000 degrees per second. Oh, 1998? What? I want 2,000! No, anyway. But here's the thing to keep in mind. If you prefer to use RC rates in Expo, you are no longer limited. You can achieve 2,000 degrees per second if that's what you want. The thing to keep in mind is that up to about 2, you have very gradual increase in rates. And then above 2, it skyrockets. So if you're trying to tune using just RC rate, don't go from 2 to 2.1. The difference will be huge, okay? Smoother RC Expo Curve. This is the RC Expo Curve. If you go back several releases, the RC Expo Curve was actually not a curve, but it was a segmented line, and it only had like 5 points. So Boris has been working on the math underneath and has been smoothing out the RC Expo Curve just to give better stick feel and smoother stick feel. So next we're going to go look at the configurator, and we're going to go through the features of the configurator, and we're going to see what else is in here that we've missed, if there's anything in here that bears talking about. Again, there are individual videos for many of these features, so I'm not going to go too in-depth on many of them. I do want to say, though, there's a new 1.8.0 configurator, and also there's a new Black Box Explorer if you use Black Box 256. So many things have changed in the last weeks. It's been hard to keep up, and if you're not on the absolute latest release, you need to make sure that you are. Hopefully, now that 3.0 has dropped and is official, there have been many compatibility breaks where, depending on the release candidate you were on, you might not have a configurator that would work, or the configurator might even corrupt your configuration on your copter and leave it in a bad state. Hopefully that will all settle out now that 3.0 is official. But you need to make sure you're on 1.8.0, Black Box Explorer 256, and Betaflight 3.0. And fortunately, it's all handled through the Chrome store right now. In fact, I'm already on Configurator 1.8.1. So it auto-updated in the background, and hopefully yours will too. So let's go through the configurator now. And the first thing I want to show you is, hey, where's my failsafe tab? Did Betaflight get rid of failsafe? Seems dangerous. It's there. One of the things Betaflight has done is they have set it into amateur mode by default. So what we've done here is we've taken a lot of this stuff and we've just hidden it away. And if I turn on expert mode, you'll see that failsafes comes back, modes and adjustments come back. These are things that many people just don't need to be bothered with and might even be a little bit confused or bewildered, maybe even angry at if they weren't expecting it. So if you're wondering where those things went, just turn on expert mode. The other thing is that some of these tabs will disappear if the feature that it pertains to is not present. CleanFlight always shows you the tabs, but then there's just nothing in the tab and it doesn't do anything. At least it did the last time I used CleanFlight, which I'll admit has been a while. Betaflight now, for example, if you don't have black box on your copter, if we go to configuration and we disable feature black box, yeah, see how the black box went away? It's gone. You're not using it? Let's just get rid of it. How about OSD? Gone. So if you see things missing over here in the left, it's either because the feature is turned off or maybe your board just doesn't support it. Okay? But it's all still there. Just you're not seeing it. So here we are in the PID tuning tab, and one of the things I want to point out to you is that the P-term set point weight has actually been changed. I think it's just a renaming. I'm not 100% sure whether the underlying logic changed or whether it was just renamed. But what used to be P-term set point weight is now described as super rates PID relaxation. And what this is, and again, by the way, Betaflight has added tooltips here. They're really helpful. So check those out if you're ever confused. The super rates PID relaxation determines the relaxation of PIDs on higher stick inputs when using super rates. A lower value reduces the I and the D during extreme stick deflections for a smoother feel and smoother behavior during acrobatic moves. Value of 1 equals fully active PIDs. So in other words, if we take this to 1, there is no change in the PIDs as you move the stick through full deflection. And as we decrease this, the I and the D gain are relaxed. Similar kind of similar to what multi-wheel used to do. Probably still does. The I and the D are relaxed as the stick is deflected, allowing smoother flips and rolls and extreme macro moves. And the lower you lower it, the more the I and the D are relaxed. Of course, there are disadvantages to having the I and the D relaxed. It's a looser feel, and you can just play with that and feel it out. Just change one thing at a time, change it high, change it low, feel the difference, see what you like. This Super Rates PID relaxation only does anything at all if you are using Super Rates. So if you've decided you like RC Rate and Expo and you hate Super Rates, and you've gone through and set these all to 0, this slider doesn't do anything. Okay? So if you want to play with this slider, you need to be using Super Expo Rates. The D-term set point weight hasn't changed. It works the same as it did in my video on the 2 degrees of freedom PID controller set point weight, and you can watch that video if you want to know more about that. One thing that has changed though is you used to be able to go, so the old settings were about 0.3 was D-term from error or from measurement, and about 1 was D-term from error, and then Betaflight 3.0 gave us the ability to do ninja mode, people call it, where you set the D set point weight to 2, and Betaflight 3.0 has, Boris is like, well, if 2's good, 3's better. We can go all the way up to 255. That's funny, I thought it went to 3, but apparently only 255. Well, my information was a little out of date. So you can set the D-term set point weight even higher than you used to be able to. And again, you can play with this, but do be careful playing with this because raising this does have the effect of, it's similar to, in some ways, to the effect of raising D-gain. So as you raise this, monitor for hot motors the same way you always do when you're adjusting the D-gain. In the filter settings, we've got the notches here, gyro and D-term notch. These are blank because at the moment this flight controller is set up with no D-term notch filter, and I really actually have no idea why that is. Don't worry about that. The default in Betaflight is to have a D-term notch filter but not a gyro notch filter, and you can watch my video on the notch filters for more information about that. Betaflight 3.0 has put up tilt compensation, camera up tilt compensation. Betaflight 3.0 has put that in as a mode, so you can turn the up tilt compensation on and off using a switch, and that is the FPV angle mix mode. That's what that is. If you add that range, then the up tilt compensation will be active when this is active and not active when it's not. And the idea here is that some people said, I like flying with the up tilt compensation, but when I try to land, I get all whacked out because I'm no longer pitched forward, I'm level. So what you can do here is you can turn this on when you're going to fly and turn it off when you're going to land. And actually some people would also like to set up air mode the same way, so that air mode is off when you're landing and on when you're flying. I'm trying to think of anything else that I've seen people dealing with that I think needs to be mentioned here. I did think of one more thing that I failed to mention. It is another cool little command line trick. If you have a board that uses the virtual COM port, and you can tell if you have one by going to the Ports tab and looking right here. If you see USB VCP at the top, then you have the virtual COM port. If you have that, then you have to be in bootloader mode to flash new firmware. The alternative to virtual COM port is a thing called a CP210 chip, which is a serial to USB converter basically, and it sits in between the bootloader and the USB port and lets you talk to the bootloader without being in bootloader mode technically. There's a lot of details there. Don't worry about them if you don't already know them. So if you have a virtual COM port, you have to be in bootloader mode to flash new firmware, but some boards don't have a bootloader button. They have really freaking annoying solder pads that are hard to, I find them impossible to short any other way than soldering. And so you're soldering to these really tiny pads, and I just hate them, and it's a huge pain in the ass. But here's an alternative. You can now, with Betaflight 3.0, put your board into bootloader mode simply by typing DFU. And when you do that, now it's in bootloader mode. See, look up here. Now it's in bootloader mode. As if you had shorted the bootloader pads or pressed the bootloader button and plugged it in, but way simpler, especially if you have a board that doesn't have a bootloader button. So yeah, just type DFU at the command line, and now you're in bootloader mode, and you can proceed to flash whatever firmware you need to flash. When you're done, unplug it, plug it back in. Now you're just back in regular mode. Well, folks, there you go. That is your Betaflight 3.0 release overview. If there's anything you think I overlooked, mention it in the comments and I'll make a video about it. That's what I do. But I think I've hit all the high points. I hope this is such a big update. It's hard to really feel like I've got a grasp on it. But, we'll work on it together. You ask questions, I'll answer them. And as always, happy flying.